Well, for more on this story, let's cross to Washington, D.C. and speak to Middle East analyst Sigurd Neubauer. Sir, thank you so much for joining us here on Al Jazeera. I mean, Saudi Arabia has obviously been criticized before for human rights violations. There's people, human rights advocates in prison, many of them without charge. Perhaps the comment by the Canadian authorities wasn't that aggressive. But certainly the reaction from the Saudis was perhaps unexpectedly strong. What did you make of it, and what do you think is behind it?
I would say that the situation is extremely grave. The international community and certainly the expert community here in Washington were all taken by surprise, because for a month we have been seeing reforms coming out of Saudi Arabia. We have heard the promise of granting more rights to women, and more rights to activists, and the need to reform the economy. And these were all positive signs, and the international community remains supportive of these measures. And all of a sudden, we see a complete reversal of these promises. And now that the manufactured crisis between Saudi Arabia and Canada is hitting a new low point, it is really, on the basic level, a message to the international community, and including to France, Germany, and the UK, that criticism of the regime will not be tolerated under any circumstances. And this is quite surprising.
So far, the Canadians have actually, after the initial comment, have maybe been a little bit quiet. I mean, they may be waiting for all of this to die down. But do you think perhaps that is a dangerous sign of things to come, that perhaps a lot of countries will be cowed from criticizing Saudi Arabia, when it comes to human rights abuses, where there's a lot to criticize?
I think that the basic level is that the new leadership in Saudi Arabia will not tolerate internal and external criticism. On the level above that is the issue with Iran. As we have seen, President Trump just reimposed new series of sanctions against Iran. And within this environment, Saudi Arabia has weakened its international position, because it has both an adversarial relationship with Iran and now a highly problematic relationship with Canada and the West. So the question is, what does this mean for the new U.S. policy regarding Iran and how it is dealing with Riyadh in this strategy? What we're seeing so far is that Saudi Arabia's unpredictable policies, whether it is its intervention in Lebanon, whether it's its war in Yemen, or the crisis in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia's new policies are really disrupting all the alliances, and we don't quite know what to make of them anymore.
I mean, you say unpredictable policies. So do you think that this reaction by Saudi was impulsive because they saw a comment that they found offensive? Or do you think that there's a level of calculation behind it? As you mentioned earlier, sending a message to the wider international community, especially many Western countries, saying, that they don't want to be criticized for certain things, even though they're putting up a facade of opening up and being a new and modern Saudi Arabia.
I think absolutely there's a calculated message behind it. The response of canceling flights, canceling trade agreements, and more importantly, withdrawing all Saudi students from Canada is disproportionate to the mild criticism that the Canadian government came up with. And this is the new reality. I would hope that this moment in time that the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is working the phones to try to de-escalate the situation between Canada and Saudi Arabia. And we're also expecting that the EU will come out with a statement anytime soon in support of the Canadian position. So this is a very dangerous and unstable environment, and the United States needs to get directly involved to calm this down.
I mean, you mentioned that we're waiting for the sort of U.S. and the EU to act. I mean, Bahrain and the UAE expressed immediate solidarity with Saudi Arabia's stance. So, they've formed a bloc on that side. Are you worried by the fact that actually there didn't seem to be such forthcoming support for the Canadian position from its Western allies?
Well, I think that the support is forthcoming, and the fact that there are not immediate statements either from Washington or from the EU shows that there are diplomatic efforts underway to try to solve this crisis immediately. As I had mentioned, I think all of us were taken by surprise because the response from the Saudi authorities do not correspond to the Canadian statement.
Be very interesting to see how it develops and if many of these nations do come out in Canada's support. For the moment, Sigurd Neubauer, Middle East analyst, thank you.